Hello, all my Croatian colleagues. I'm very happy to be joining you, even if it's only in this way, for your Translating Europe workshop. I am Amalie Foss. I am the president of AVTE, Audio-Visual Translators Europe. We are a federation. We are the federation for translates for the national associations and organizations for AV translators of every kind. We focus on Europe because we are all Europeans and this is our starting point. But I don't think we are going to finish with Europe. And let me tell you a little bit about AVTE. We started about 10 years ago. We can't really, I suppose we could work out exactly when if we dug through all our records, but nobody has time for that. We started out as an association, an international association, registered in France, and now we are a federation. And we comprise, let me think, I think we are up to 17 or 18 countries. It's a bit difficult to tell because countries join and then we have to wait for the next assembly or general assembly. Yeah. We have one every second year before the country is officially a member. But in essence, in every practical sense, you're a member from the moment you join. So that's why we're never entirely sure of the number of countries. But I think we're up to 18 countries, or at least 18 associations. So some countries have more than one association, and we're not limited to one association per country. If there are several, they can all join. So that's where we are right now. In most countries, AV translators and other translators are organized in associations because the legislation has been prohibitive. But in some countries, there are proper organizations, i.e. unions. Real unions, but only a few. In Denmark, where I come from, we are members of a real union, the Danish Union of Journalists, and I am the chairman of our group, the group of AV translators within the Danish Union of Journalists. It makes a big difference to be a real union. There are more resources on which to draw in terms of help for our efforts to improve conditions for AV translators. Like I said, the legislation has been prohibitive and it has made freelancers and self-employed equal to corporations, which is, of course, nonsense. But it's changing now. And we're very hopeful of this, and it's certainly my hope that more associations will become unions throughout the countries, now that they can no longer be prevented from forming actual unions. So this is why we always say associations and organizations in each country. We got together all these national organizations and associations to speak with one voice. We share information. We exchange a lot of information constantly. And we make sure that everybody is aware of what is going on. Now, a lot of the companies that you work for are truly global. At any rate, they are international, but some of them are truly global. And it makes no sense to be just the national associations and organizations, and to speak and to try and communicate with these companies on a nation-to-nation basis. It also makes no sense to try and communicate with the EU as a single nation. So for us it's a lot better, obviously, but we honestly think, no irony or anything, we honestly think it is a lot better for companies as well, because they can get an answer very, very quickly. There's no problem. We can simply speak on behalf of thousands of AV translators in all the different countries. They don't always like it so much because they're hoping they can divide and rule. You know, who wouldn't do that if it got them somewhere? But on the other hand, we are saving them an awful lot of time. For the EU system, it's a big advantage to be talking to a federation instead of having to communicate with each national association, presuming that they can even find us, which is not always the case. But this is why we got together. It seems so simple and so obvious, but of course, this is why we got together. And the reason we think it's important to get together and get all this work done is because conditions are not easy for AV translators. There are various ends of the market. Some are in the good end of the market, most are not. There are some countries where things in general are better than in other countries. But all in all, it's not amazing. The pandemic has made it so much worse. People are at home and watching something constantly. So much content is being produced for streaming services, for games, all sorts of content that needs localization, whether it be dubbing or subtitling or anything you can think of, audio description, everything. So much is being produced, so much money is being made, and absolutely none of it is going to the people who do the work. We're not alone in our profession in this problem, but it is very bad in our profession. It is, I don't even know what to say. It makes me very, very angry because it is so obviously unfair and it's so obviously destructive. So this is a very big part of AVTE's, the work we do is fighting for better working conditions and for better fees, of more fair remuneration. So fair fees and fair working conditions. Another big problem, aside from the very short turnaround times and the miserable fees, is machine translation, because it's being used to drive our fees down even more. The thing about machine translation is that it doesn't really work for AV translation. People keep saying, companies and the people who develop the machine translation tools keep saying it works, and human beings should just relax, lean back and do some editing. That is not how it works for AV translation. There are many good tools for technical translation and so on, where it actually helps translators. It doesn't help translators in AV translation. We are translating human speech, and it is no real help to us. Even the most sophisticated, even the best of tools, is no help to us. Human speech is essentially chaotic, and even the most formulaic, the most predictable series, soaps, what have you, will contain surprises in terms of language. Even though, you know, it's all this American stuff, you know exactly what they're going to talk about, you know exactly how it's going to go, what the plots are like, all that stuff. They'll still say something that doesn't work, that is not in the machine translation. And we have never been presented with something that doesn't require more editing than it's worth. And it is very, very difficult from our point of view to view it as anything other than a tool that's being used to drive the fees down when it works as poorly as it does. So that is another big problem for us, is machine translation, simply because it's being made something it isn't, and it's being used to make our conditions even worse. They keep saying, but it's going to come, and it's going to work, and it will, and neural networks and all that. But it hasn't. It hasn't since the mid-1950s. It still doesn't work for us. So how do we try to do something about all these problems? Well, if you want to help, you can join your national association or organization if you're lucky enough to have a real union in your country. But the associations can also be very effective. And join them. Just join them and back them up in their efforts to combat this. One thing is sure, no matter how much in love or not you are with your local and national association, is that they will get further than you can on your own. So join. Even though you're not somebody who joins things, I was not somebody who joined things, and look where I am now. I'm not saying it will go as badly for you, but join your association and back them up. So the national associations are all members of AVTE. We try to talk to the companies, to convince them to bargain with them for fair remuneration, either nationally or on the European level through our federation. And we try to talk to the institutions, such as the EU, or the institutions of the EU, to convince them, to explain to them that we're here and that what we do is important. And it should, you know, we should have decent working conditions, and we should have decent fees. And it is important, and I'll get to that in a minute, why it's important. And we also try to talk to the ministries of culture in the various countries. We are not above writing a letter to a local minister of culture somewhere, saying that there are several thousand AV translators across Europe who has an opinion on a matter of national but also international importance, and to back up our colleagues. And we also are on occasion backed up by the Fédération Internationale des Traducteurs, FIT, the giant worldwide organization of translators. That's just one example. We also cooperate with other organizations, locally or internationally, other translators, other groups of freelancers. You know, we're all in the same boat in many respects, and this is how we try to work, because it is very important that we're here, and that the main part of the work, at least, but that the work is carried out by human beings, basically. And why is this important? It's important because AV translation is very important to local language and local culture. There is a massive wave of English, mainly English, content coming in, washing across Europe, if you like. And if we don't translate, turn this into functional, good language. I know that's a very subjective view, but good language in each country, it's going to have an effect. You can't read terrible subtitles for hours every day and it has no effect on you. It will have an effect on you. And children are reading a lot of subtitles. If I had children, which unfortunately I don't, I would not have them watching certain things where the subtitles were simply too poor, because I would be worried about how their development, how it would affect their development in terms of language. But it affects adults as well. So again, why is AV translation important? Why is good AV translation important? There's a cultural aspect. There's also a democratic aspect of all this. There's the, I shouldn't have to say this to an audience of translators and people who work for the EU Commission, but it is very important that anything that you wish to translate is translated correctly. In terms of AV translation, it means you have to translate the words, but it also means you have to pass on to the audience in the target language exactly what's going on. So the word takes on different meanings depending on the context and depending on the visuals, and this is the very unique aspect of AV translation, is that we're translating the words and we have to get the tone exactly right, and the tone depends on the visuals. So there's a whole different aspect that we are dealing with, and that is part of our work. There's the time constraints. People can only read so much. If they want to follow the visuals and read without thinking about it, this is what our Finnish colleague, the academic Tiina Tuominen, refers to as incidental reading. This is what you read without thinking about it. And this is how we want people to read subtitles. So you read, you don't think about it, the eye darts up and down, you catch some of what's in the subtitle, you go back to the image and you do it again, and you don't think about it. You are watching, you're essentially watching the visuals and listening, and then you're doing some incidental reading. And this is the very peculiar aspect, peculiar not in the sense of strange, but in the sense of belonging solely to our profession. This is the peculiar aspect of the kind of translating that we do, and it is very, very important to get it right. Partly because any product, a very humble one or a big flagship movie, all that stuff is very important to get it right. And when I say democratic, it's because there is also there's a lot of documentary and news translation that goes on, and it has to do with the accuracy is very, very important. In terms of news, it's sometimes it has to be done very quickly, but it still has to be correct. You can't ask a machine translation tool, a robot, to do that. It's just not right. It's not going to be right, and it's not going to work, and it's going to be a terrible problem in terms of disseminating information correctly. So it's very important that that subtitling is done right. It's also very important that dubbing is done right. You want the correct content and context, and you want really don't want to get your children used to the fact that an acceptable quality is a screechy, couple of screechy voices who just race through whatever they're watching because it has to be done cheaply. You want them to get this an equal experience to the experience that the source language viewers have. Whether they're children or whether they're adults, you want an equal experience. So it is very important, and of course you can really do things when you have a voiceover or dubbing for documentaries and especially for news. When the source language is the volume is turned down and you have a voiceover, you can have there's a big margin for error there. Let me say it that way. And it is very, very important that it's done right, or people can be, the wrong information can be imparted to the viewers. So there's a cultural aspect that each work deserves to be represented, to be interpreted correctly and well. And it's something that we owe ourselves and each other in terms of culture, in terms of respect, that it is art, very often art. It is certainly something that people have, it is good craftsmanship. Somebody has taken the trouble to do this well. And it should be represented and interpreted and translated in that way. If it's not, if you start arguing that, oh well, it's poor quality, it's not very good, it doesn't really matter, just as long as there's something there, a couple of lines, as long as there's a voice saying something, then you really have to think, well, why is it being broadcast? What is it there for? And also, I think it's a false argument, because I have done a lot of very humdrum translation in my life. And I can tell you that terrible reality TV, God knows what, is not particularly easy to translate. It doesn't make it easier that it's crap, it doesn't make it easier. You still have to represent it faithfully. And it can be very difficult. I mean, in terms of editing your subtitles, of getting it right, of getting the timing right, reality TV is a bit of a nightmare. Heavy documentaries, very weighty documentaries, can be almost easier to deal with, because there is such a measured pace and a rhythm to it that makes it very easy much easier to deal with, really. So whether it's good, whether it's bad, it still has to be translated properly. And there's the democratic aspect. We want our information and our news disseminated correctly, or otherwise we could all be in trouble. Thank you so much for listening so patiently. I've tried to explain some of the aspects of the work we do in AVTE, and I hope it made sense to you. The more of us who are members of our local associations and organizations, the more people there are to back up the work of AVTE, and the more we can achieve. So again, please join your local association. Please back it up. And I hope you have a very enjoyable workshop today. And I just wish I could be there with all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.